is they were all in one accord in one place. One of the things we're doing is putting our Sunday school classes together just for the 4 or 5 weeks. I like adult Sunday school. I like small groups. I like donuts and whatever else people stuff into your body, and people say it's not going to help my body. You know what? Your body's going to be worm food anyway, and don't worry about it. But there's some things that matter to me, and I believe matter to God in a great way when we talk about the church and the home. The two things that to me are most important in America are the home and the church. If we get our homes right, we get our churches right, we will fix the government. And I think the problem that conservatives are making all across America is trying to fix a government while our churches are a mess and our homes are a mess. And you can't fix. It's like trying to regulate morality. We're going to make laws so everybody has to be nice. Get them all in Sunday school again. You know, we didn't have a bunch of shooting going on when we had the majority of America in Sunday school. Not that it never happened, but it just wasn't that big a deal, and didn't have as much when we had guns either. But check out the mass shootings that have gone on. See how many went in places that were not gun friendly. The sign usually said no guns allowed, and that's where the shooting took place. Duh, mass shooters are cowards. If everybody carries a gun, we shoot the guy, and then we all live happily ever after. And you say, are you pro-gun? You're not listening. I'm pro-Bible, I'm pro-home, I'm pro-church, and after that, I'm pro-Constitution, and I am all for it. But the thing that, the tool the devil uses as much as anything in politics, in churches, and in homes is a simple principle of division. Matthew 12:25 says, every kingdom or house divided against itself shall come to desolation. It's a divine promise 3 times in the Gospels that when you get people divided, God will curse them. It's not that we mess it up ourselves. It's God will step down and say, I'm done with you, and messes it up. And that's why you find so much intentional division going on in the political realm, especially because it's so up front, we all see it. Now, if you look at Acts chapter 2, verse 1, and where this is reviewed, we're just going to take a moment here. But these, I'd love to have everybody in these classes for the next 4 weeks to get these principles. I can't run ahead. I'd like to give you commercials, but I don't have time. Acts 2:1, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. I said 4 things last week. Number 1, they were not always doing right. Remember, we read in Acts 5 about they were lying about their giving. They were in one accord in one place, but some of them were liars. Of course, God killed them in those days. That was awesome. But anyway, aren't you glad God doesn't kill all the liars in church today? But anyhow, secondly, they were not all acting kindly. And we read there in Acts chapter 6, where widows were being neglected because there was so much persecution in the church, and there was a need for food and care, and it was the Grecians against the Hebrews. Gasp. Ethnic problems in the house of God. Say, how could that happen? Because they're people. And where there are people, there are problems. But though there were people who were not doing right, as far as lying, stealing, all that, some people in a church, they'll panic. I can't believe everybody doesn't give. If we would just all do our part, yeah, that is a big if. Have you ever been anywhere where everybody did their part? Doesn't happen that way. It's up to everybody what they want to do, and as for me and my house, we're on the team, and if you're going to be a water boy, go ahead, but we're going to be out swinging the bat. It was great last night. Had a huge crowd of teenagers, junior high, high school, great big crowd of teenagers, dressed up, fun stuff, and we had this big piñata. It has nothing to do with the lesson, but I was thinking about swinging a bat. We started a church in Hemet some time ago. Kirk Beard and his wife April came over, and we flew them out. We rented the buildings for them, rented the house for them, knocked on doors, did the special music, everything. Their church is doing great. Had 597 in church on their anniversary a couple weeks ago. But anyway, so their youth pastor, Brother Edward, came over and brought a bunch of their teens, not a bunch, but maybe, 15 or so, 20. And we had a piñata going. Now, a junior high girl with a 6-foot piñata stick, that's just not smart. And she's blindfolded, and Edward's just standing there. If you don't know Edward, he's just happy-go-lucky, and he's rather symmetrically proportioned. Height and width, girth, all about the same. And he's just standing there, and this junior high girl blindfolded goes, whack! And just like a pirate, slices him right across the middle. It was hilarious. But anyway, terrible thing, but I wish we'd had that on YouTube, because junior high girl takes out adult man, boom, knocks him. But it was great. So God's people don't always act real nice. Yet, they were in one accord, in one place, and God blessed them. Look, don't panic if you find out somebody in this room's a sinner. Don't panic if you find out somebody didn't do their commitment to whatever, or they lost a job, or didn't pay a bill. Look, I would love to say we all walk the talk, but let's be honest. We stumble the talk. The just man falleth 7 times and rises up again. And understanding, and I'm going somewhere, these lessons will build in another. We talked about Paul and Barnabas, about leaders getting along. And this church that was in one accord in one place, you go back to Acts chapter 15, Paul and Barnabas, 2 of the main men, got in a contention. This is the word God used. The contention was so sharp that Paul and Barnabas split company and never worked together again. And sometimes we think, why can't God's people and leaders, and why can't they all get along? Because we're all related to Adam. We're sinners. And in God's incredible mercy, he blesses sinners. Because it's not about the sinner, it's about the Savior. And you may be, I remember Dr. Howells, our pastor, telling a soul winning story. He said he was out with a new convert and trying to teach the guy to lead a soul to Christ. And the guy came along with him, and this is back in the happy days, the 50s era. And the guy came out soul winning. He's got a T-shirt, got his pack of cigarettes rolled up in his shirt sleeve. And they knock on a door of somebody that they'd gotten a name from somewhere. And Dr. House looks and says, maybe you ought to put those in your pocket. And I don't know why, but anyway, they're Southern Baptists. Most of them smoke, so it's not a big deal. But anyway, I'm not condoning or condemning, all right? I'm just telling the story. It's beyond the statute of limitations. So he goes in and goes through the gospel, and he's witnessing this husband and wife. And they say, we want to get saved. And as he's going through the gospel, he hears the guy's kind of behind him in a chair a little bit, and he hears this familiar sound. And he thinks, I can't believe what I'm hearing. And he's got his Bible out and going through the gospel, and pretty soon there's, he can smell smoke, and they pray and get saved, and they walk out, and Brother Howell says, what were you thinking in there? He said, man, I just got nervous. I thought you were going to lose them. God doesn't use perfect people. Should we all give it a good shot? Yes, but don't fall apart when you find out there's a sinner in the camp. And if you were around any big church, the bigger the church, the more people, the more unusual things happen. But I remember sitting in our church years ago in the tent. We have a Pathfinder department, our special ed adults, and I could see one of our Pathfinders here nervous. Something was not going well, and he had a magazine or newspaper, and he's just twisting it, and I'm preaching, I'm thinking this is not going well, and I don't know. It's like a special forces guy. You're looking, what's going to happen here? And I had no idea. I couldn't see anything going on. And we had a center aisle, and he was back here, and then somebody else is up here, and all of a sudden he jumps up with that big rolled up thing, goes up about 3 rows and just goes, whack, and whacks this lady on the back of the head and her shoulder. And it turned out there was a great big bug had landed. We're in a tent, and everything was in our tent. Skunks, possums, tarantulas, and this big bug had flown in and landed on her back, and he's watching that, and he's like, I'm going to do something. And he smashed that bug, and he sat down, everything was fine. Thank you for taking care of our disturbance. But, things don't always go right. But God doesn't use perfect people. God uses people. And we aren't always going to act just right. And so we don't always do right. We're not always acting kindly. And sometimes leaders do have some problems. And there were some people who were hard to work with last week. Over in the book of Philippians, Paul's writing from jail. and he says, greetings from the people in the palace. All these people who'd gotten saved in the jail were saying, hey, say hi to the guys over there in Philippi. But he said that through his time in prison, other Christians were emboldened. They were, man, if Paul can do it and go to jail, I can get the gospel out. And he's preaching, and he said, but other people, they're using it as an object of contention. And it's almost like, yeah, look where Paul is. Today on the internet and in books, you'll see people using someone's difficulty to make them look bad. How would you like to go down in history as the guy who was trying to make the Apostle Paul look bad? Probably not the spot you want. And since we have no idea who God's using in what way, maybe we just ought to be good to people, but it's not always going to happen. Sometimes people are going to be stupid. And Paul said this in Philippians chapter 1. He said, notwithstanding in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and I therein do rejoice, yea, and will rejoice. Paul knew it was not about him. It was about the message of the gospel. And so somebody's got a problem with me, and so somebody doesn't treat me right. As long as the gospel's preached, I don't care. And that's where we were last week. Now, this week, and we got into Ephesians 4 a little bit. We don't have time to get there. But we're in Acts chapter 1 and verse 14. Acts 1 and verse 14. And we're just going back here. And he lists in verse 13 a list of people that were there. But he doesn't name all of them. Later it says there was about 120. But look at verse 14. These all continued in prayer and supplication with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brethren. Now this morning, I want to talk about a little bit about this matter of being one accord in prayer. We should be in one accord with our spouse. You and your spouse have got to be on the same page, going the same way. Are my wife and I going to differ often? Are we going to clash? On occasion. Not often, but on occasion we'll clash. But our goal, our object, can't vary. What are our goals? Well, one is we want to honor God. What are our goals? Another one, we love our children to honor God. What are our goals? To use our marriage and our earthly strength, time, and means to be a help to others. The great commandment to love God and love your neighbors yourself. So, we're getting ready to do something in the kitchen. I always tease about one day, and we differ on just about everything there is to differ on, except we both agree that I am wonderful. But besides that, and ushers, help me out here. We were one day had a blue denim and lace activity at our house, and we had this big thing of water, and she said, let's cut up some oranges or lemons or whatever to go into the water. And so I'm just going to be a blessing, right? And so I grab these things and I start cutting them this way, and she's over here with a knife and she looks over. We don't even cut lemons the same way. I cut them this way and she cuts them that way. But that's nothing to fuss about. That's just life. We're gonna differ. We're gonna, get over it. That's nothing to cause fussing in your home over. Some of you live in a home where your spouse likes the temperature way up high and the other one doesn't believe in heaters. And thank God, she and I are both agree on that. We're both temperature the same, which is great. At least we can sleep. One man, a younger married guy, he said, man, I married an octopus crossed with an electric heater. I think, man, I am dying here. But those are you just learn to live with those differences. But we can't have the husband who comes to me and says they had 2 little boys. He said, the dream of my life would be that my boys would serve God. And my wife thinks that would be the worst thing they could possibly do. She wants them to do something with their life. Be doctors, lawyers, and that is a problem. Because it's not about what the career is. The goal is honor God. That our children would honor God. Our children would love God. And so we ought to be one accord with our goals. We ought to be one accord, though, with our church. We ought to be in one accord with our co-laborers. But I want to talk about this matter of being in one accord in prayer. Look over to Hebrews. So the people here in Acts chapter 1, they were in one accord in prayer and supplication. And we're going to get to some very practical things next week and the week after. I want to talk to you next week and the week after about the blessings of one accord. Things God will do for you if you will stop fussing with your spouse. The things God will do for our church if we can stay unified, and the things we'll forfeit if we don't stay unified. Hebrews chapter 4, and I know we got younger Christians here and all. If you can't keep up when I ask to turn pages, write the reference down, read it when you get home, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just next year know where they are, right? Hebrews chapter 4, and look down at verse 16. Hebrews 4:16. Let us therefore, last verse of Hebrews chapter 4, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. We go to God in prayer to find help in time of need. You have, from Steve Sandberg, who's up here, when did you lose Sharon, Steve? In December. My dad went to heaven 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago. And since my dad went to heaven, I think we counted 14 of our family members here in our church who've gone to heaven. That is unprecedented. We've been 2 and 3 years without a death in our church. And, and they were scattered around the room. Betty Yawns here just a couple of months ago lost her husband. And over and over and over. And in Hebrews it talks about, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace. Now look at this last phrase. We use this verse, I don't think it's wrong, but we use this verse, I say, Cooks, is that your last name? Brother and Miss Cook and their family, go to God, find grace to help start that church. There's nothing wrong with that. They need God's help. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think if we look at the English here, look what it says. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace. What's that next word? To help. You know, an awful lot of this Bible teaches it's not about me. I am going to go to God, and this hymnal represents, this microphone cord represents a mic that's not very good. This hymnal is going to represent help, and Norm, you be God. You can stay right there. Here. I'm the Christian, Norm is God, the Cook's the family going to start a church in Concord. And I come over and I come boldly to the throne of grace. I can come aggressive, the word bold. I can come saying, hey, I need something. I get grace, what's the next word? To help. Not for help. For help might imply me. To help means I am to help in a time of need. I better put that back wherever it came from. I'm not sure who it belongs to. Now, most of us understand that God will help you and God will help me, and I'm not against God. And we'll look at this in prayer. The Bible talks about us going to God, give us this day our daily bread. There's nothing wrong with praying for food. There's nothing wrong with praying for your needs. James talks about going to the pastor in prayer for healing, and I'm for that. I believe God heals. I've got no problem with that. I also believe sometimes God doesn't heal, and we all understand that. But what we're looking at here in Hebrews is, who are you praying for? We ought to be on each other's team here. We ought to be going to God to get something so we can help somebody else. Whether it be time or wisdom or money or food or a car. And I'm not being critical of anybody, I'm just pointing this out, but there's a whole lot of us that we want everything in order in our life. But we don't spend much time trying to get everything in order in someone else's life. I remember hearing Dr. Hiles say, I had some money saved for a rainy day, but every time I get some, I meet somebody upon whom it's raining. We go to God. Go over to John chapter 17. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Go back a little bit. When we're talking about being in one accord, you want to see God's blessing on your family, on our church, on our state, on our nation. We need to learn to go to God in one accord to pray for help, so to pray for grace, so that we can help somebody. We ought to, this big day. Every Thanksgiving, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, we have a big day. One year we'll go out into the community, we'll bring church to the people. The next year we bring people to the church. And there's different purposes for both, but this Thanksgiving weekend, the week before Thanksgiving, look, there are people who are going to come to church who will not come to church the week before or the week after, but because there's groceries here, they'll come to church. And someone says, well, they're just coming for the food. That's why you go to work. And most of us, that's why we're nice to our spouse. Because we want something. I'm going to be nice to my wife. Why? Because I don't want her to be a bag. We're in church, right? One of the men said, we're in church, let's be honest. Look, this thing, I have lost count. Joy Beavers is here somewhere. Joy's in the back with Rick. We met Joy on a big day. We met her because we were having services out in different places. Right now in our Christian school, Donovan and Desmond Andrews are in church, in school, and their family, had all 7 kids in the baptistry a few weeks ago. Where'd they come from? The Quail Valley bus route had a big day last Thanksgiving and gave away groceries, and their family came to the park and got groceries. When you have 7 kids and mom and dad, you can gather a lot of groceries in one shot. And you know what happened? Because somebody was willing to put their money together, buy groceries, buy turkeys, go have a public church service. We've got not only people in church this morning, and Mr. and Mrs. Andrews come to church off and on, but just work schedules and all the work weekends a lot, but the kids are here all the time. Kids in the Christian school, because we go to God and we say, God, I need something so I can go help in a time of need. The roof of the building, this is our church. Why should anyone else care about fixing the roof if we don't care about fixing the roof? And, we're sitting on who knows how many $1 million worth of property here, 16 and a half acres and all these buildings, and we got a couple of $100,000 left on a mortgage. And we should not fret over a $60,000 roof repair. That shouldn't really be a big deal. If 60 of us put in $1,000, and a lot of us, my family included, could put in $1,000. That's just not really beyond reach. If you wrecked your car and you needed $1,000 to get a new car, you would have the $1,000. But that's different because that's to help you. And this thing of Hebrews of going to the throne of grace is to get something from God to help, to invest in someone else. You're in John chapter 17. John 17, and look down at verse 21. John 17, 21. Now let's go to verse 20. This is they call the Our Father which art in heaven the Lord's Prayer. That's not the Lord's Prayer, that's a model prayer. It's how we title it, don't panic over it. But this is when Jesus was praying. This is the Lord's Prayer, his intercessory prayer as he prays for you and me. We're going to go into the middle of Jesus' prayer in verse 20. Neither pray I for these alone, these being the disciples, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word. So Jesus is praying for the disciples in the prior verses. Now he's praying for those people who are going to get saved through the disciples, witnessing, who are going to get saved through them. Basically, he's now praying for you. Verse 21, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us. Now, if you put a period there, that would be a kumbaya, isn't this great? It's all about us. But again, Christianity is not about me. There's not a period there. He finishes the sentence. He says, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. When you fuss, when churches get divided and have church splits, when husband and wives are yelling at one another, the world doesn't believe. That's a problem. That the world may know, that the world may believe that God sent Jesus. So let's be honest for a minute. So somebody doesn't clean the bathroom like they should, and you go into the bathroom here at church and you're mad. Somebody, they didn't do their job. What's more important, people believing in Jesus or the bathroom being cleaned like you want it cleaned? Now you're having to think. Some of you clean people. How many of you remember Gina Armando? Gina Armando is one of the best soul winners ever came to our church. Some of you and all of us, we all think we ought to have our money in order, right? When Bill Armando died, Gina's world collapsed economically. Her health went where she couldn't work much. And Ed, wasn't she renting a room from you for a while? All right, Ed and Kathy had a widow move in with them. Now, I think we all ought to have our world in order. But Gina Armando is one of the best soul winners I've ever met in my life. Gary and Rocky Mowry are in church this morning. Their kids are in Bible college or married and in the ministry because Gina Armando and Nancy Forrest knocked on their door. Now, we'll just say Nancy Forrest is unusual. And Gina Armando is also unusual. Where are the people you knocked on their door and got them saved and they're in Bible college in the ministry? But your bathrooms are cleaned and your money's in order. Now, I'm not against clean bathrooms and our money being in order. I am against us not liking people over it. If you don't like the bathroom being dirty, clean it. Someone comes to me and says, you know, I saw there were weeds in the flower bed. Obviously, God revealed that to you because it's His will you pull those weeds. But He did not reveal it to you so you'd have an attitude toward the people of God, because I don't remember if Jesus even had a flower bed. But you know how silly we get? We're nuts. We bring divisiveness into the work of God in our homes and our churches, and that divisiveness puts a wall between us and God. And while we're fussing over whoever cooked those burgers at the hamburger night did not cook mine well enough, then throw it in the trash and go to In-N-Out. And I use this illustration often because it's simple and it's not offensive, but if I go to the drawer this morning and I pull out a pair of socks and I notice it's the last pair of socks, I will do one of two things. I will go to Walmart and buy socks, or I'll go to the washing machine and wash socks. But number 3 is never going to happen. I'm never going to fuss at my wife about a pair of socks, because our relationship's worth way more than a pair of socks. You say, well, I just think a woman ought to have. Just shut up. We don't care what you think. Because God won't curse your home if you go barefooted. You come in here this morning, if I have my hands raised, how many are here with shoes and no socks? There's some here. You say, oh, that's disgusting. I think so too, but that's just a matter of how you were raised. Most of the world does not know what socks are. I understand that. But we do know what unity is. Look, I'm not saying we're going to put our youth group with the youth group who has the rock and roll and the kissing contest and they slip outside after the church service and smoke pot. That's not unity, that's disunity, and that's compromise. But hey, you found out your brother's got a problem? Oh, well, isn't that something? Let's hope we don't look too close at you. God uses people. By the way, speaking of, I mentioned Nancy and Judy. Nancy Forrest and Judy also, Nancy Forrest and Gina. Nancy Forrest was homeless. I know she lived in the Tiller's garage for quite a while. And I know she went home to home. And she met Jim. Jim was one of the best soul winners we ever had in our church. And Jim was weird. I'll tell you, Jim was fearless. One arm shorter than the other. He'd been through life with some handicaps. And so he didn't care what anybody thought of him because no one had ever thought much of him. Jim, they called him the bulldog in the jail. He'd go into the jail and witness and preach. He'd preach in the jail. He'd preach the rescue mission. He didn't care. You know that verse in Jeremiah, be not afraid of their faces? Jim wasn't. He'd been made fun of so much in his life, he just really didn't care what you said. And little Jim, Mary's big Nancy, they walked down this aisle together one Sunday night after church, and I did their wedding, and I said, "You may kiss the groom." And she leaned down. Those are great Christians. And I'm not teasing. I'll tease about the outward appearance, but I'll tell you, those are great Christians. More people in our church through the unusual avenues. Let's be very careful. One of the best soul winners and teachers in our church, I went to their home one time, and it was an older home. And you know the old carpet that was real thick, tightly woven carpet, but some was high and low, and there was like a pattern that was up high, and then a pattern that was down low? You could only see the high pattern. That's how thick the dirt was. You couldn't vacuum the floor because it would destroy any vacuum. There was so much dirt in that house. They were two of the best Sunday school teachers we had in our church. Now, I'm not going to have them teach home ec in the Christian school. But they love God. Now, I'll preach against liquor and drugs and immorality. I'll preach against all kinds of worldly sins. But sometimes we together people can cause great division over things that God really is not impressed with. I mean, those things that really matter to us, go to Vanuatu where Philip Pinero is and ask if anybody even cares if they have socks. They're grateful to have feet. I mean, he's the one who teases that everybody in his church, all the men are fundamental Baptists. They all wear a tie, only they wear it around their waist. Their view of discretion is different than ours. But they get saved, baptized, start churches, have entire villages getting saved. And the first thing they do ask for is clothes. But one accord in prayer. I would encourage you to put away, now the thing that you like, keep liking it. I love that my wife likes our house in order and clean and all that. I love that. But I want to pray for people. Who have you prayed for that bothers you? That person that irritates you at work, have any 2 or 3 of you gone to the throne of grace in prayer for that person? How about the person in your church? You think, oh, that person irritates me. When's the last time you went to the throne of grace praying for them? And that's why we don't have what the book of Acts had. Because these people, they went in one accord in prayer and supplication. Somebody in the church has a need, we ought to be praying for them. Somebody in the church has hurt you. Get somebody else praying for them. I love Marlene Evans. Somebody'd say, go to her with some gossipy type stuff, and she'd get on her knees right then and grab their hand and pull them to her and say, let's pray for them right now. Number 1, that shuts off gossip. And number 2, you're scriptural. Praying for people. Who is it that just frustrates you no end? Don't complain, pray. How about this? At least match the amount of time you spend complaining to the amount of time you spend praying. Because if we will get in one accord in prayer and supplication, a whole lot of good things are going to happen. We better close in prayer. We'll take about 5 minutes and we'll start. Father, bless us. Help us, please, Lord, that we might be people of prayer, one accord in prayer and supplication. That we might come to the throne of grace to find grace to help others. Whether it be financial help, whether it be food and clothing for the needy, whether it be people who need to get saved. Lord, help us to pray more than we complain. And certainly we want to improve, we want to fix things, we want to work on things, but may we not cause disunity. May we be a help to others in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, about 5 minutes. Choir will start singing. We'll get started.